listening to the 10 Questions with the Musical Mind podcast with your host, Peter Harris.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of 10 Questions with the Musical Mind. I am Peter Harris, your host. In this episode, we welcome back to the program iconic musician Gary Husband. Gary Husband, of course, is the drummer and pianist, long known as a band leader with Gary Husband's Force Majeure and Drive. Also as a bandmate of legendary musicians such as Alan Holdsworth, John McLaughlin, Billy Cobham, Mike Stern, just too many to mention, Level 42, the list goes on and on. So Gary joins us this time from Vienna, where he's doing some recording sessions, and he's soon to go back out on a European tour with Fourth Dimension and John McLaughlin. And we discuss both his approach to specific songs in his catalog, as well as how his classical piano training has affected his approach over the years, and just various stories from his life in music. And I think you'll enjoy this conversation. It's very enlightening. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with Gary Husband. Hello, Gary. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, Peter. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure, really.
Now, you're joining us from Vienna, is that right?
Yes.
Beautiful. You know, I lived in Europe. I lived in Germany for a few years, and I never got to Vienna. I regret that because it's supposed to be.
Oh, did you really? Whereabouts in Germany?
Oh gosh, in the Rhineland-Pfalz area, right on the French border. A little tiny village called Miesau, but it was near Kaiserslautern, Hamburg, that kind of thing. So.
Miesau. Is that where the soup comes from? No, I'm just kidding.
Right. So I got a lot of things I want to go. Now, are you over there with Fourth Dimension right now?
No,
okay.
I'm not. I'm here to do some recording of a lot of really out there piano arrangements that I've been doing of somebody's material, and it's kind of a presentation of their compositions, but I had a lot of freedom to kind of develop it and form it in the way that kind of seemed like a good idea.
Cool.
And it's all sounding pretty good. And
okay.
Tomorrow we go in for the first day. It's a very amazing classical studio they have here in Vienna. And I will be playing a Steinway Model D. And, so there's no excuse.
You can't blame the equipment when the equipment's yeah. Right.
Not this time.
Well, I wanted to start off before we get into the questions I had with a quick note. You and I interviewed you about a year ago, I guess, and at that time we were about on the year anniversary probably of Alan Holdsworth's death. And unfortunately, that's sort of bad news, but at this time I'm joining you just after the death of singer Paul Williams. And that's it's just another sad note in that musical family. So I just, I want to pass my little note condolences to his friends and family. And
thanks. Yeah, it is. It's bizarre and it's just real sad,
Yeah, he was the. If I don't think of Alan as creating much vocal music, but when you think of singer with him, I don't think of Jack Bruce. I think of Paul Williams. I think of Metal Fatigue, Panic Station, White Line. He was the singer. But,
Yeah. I was really. I remember when we were doing the first one. Just a slight, if I can interrupt you there.
Sure.
The first record we did was actually going to be. Because when I first started with Alan was singing, I mean, live, And I don't even know if anybody knows that, except for we probably did about 3 or 4 shows somewhere, in the London area or around London, and he was singing, yeah. So
could he sing well? Could he?
I mean, he could kind of sing. He wasn't a very strong singer.
Sure.
But he had quite of a attractive sort of sonority, if that's the right word,
right,
to his voice. It really suited his compositions. and in a way, it's always quite authentic when you hear somebody who's sort of brought about melodies and they interpret, and when they sing them, it's such a personal kind of viewing, insight into exactly how they heard it,
Right, that's a good point, because if you sing a melody or hum a melody, you're really not that he was very constrained by technique, but you're not constrained by the limitations of the instrument or the string or the whatever. You can purely just go off what you were hearing in your head. So it's an interesting to take the pure idea that he had.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I want
It
to
is.
go into...
I still have cassettes of some of those songs where he's singing the melody.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to hear
and-
that. Just to hear his voice. I mean, of course I know his speaking voice, but that'd be interesting, huh? And I think a lot of people don't go, because of course years ago I went back to his stuff with Higginbottom's Wrench and the stuff that not many people heard of. And I just can't help but think that if people had heard, I mean, his playing in the 60s was just so virtuosic compared to what most people were hearing. But I want to get into you some, and I'm struck by your, being I know you've referenced this, you're not a multi-instrumentalist, you're a dual instrumentalist, I guess, keys and drums, and those are your fortes. But a song like Dirty and Beautiful, it seems to me like there's almost times when you're like hitting the tom, the high toms and stuff, almost like in an open passage where I could almost see you hitting chords on the piano. It's almost like you're thinking the same way. Does that make sense to you? I mean, I know I'm being kind of vague, but it's kind of like you're filling the spaces the same way that you would on keys. And that might be me reading into it, but...
That's interesting. Because I realized something just only recently, after years and years of people asking me, where can you see the correlation between the two instruments the most, and people have always latched onto this, is it some kind of melodic sense, and do you play the drums more melodically? And the answer is no. I really don't hear the drums melodically at all. And there are certain questions the other way too, which don't really sort of make too much sense to me. But I think what you're speaking of is a kind of a kind of punctuation that we all have, whether it's in our speaking voice or our musical voice, if we're active musicians.
I want to say maybe if it's maybe phrasing or cadence, a certain rhythm that you naturally have. If that's if that's a way, like you have a flow to you that maybe that translates between instruments. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a rhythmic flow, and as I mentioned just then, I realized that a lot of, and I'm realizing this because I'm looking at doing a drum e-course, an online course for drums very soon. Okay. So I kind of entered this very analytical phase. Sure. And I'm looking at myself purely by example, hopefully to others, to be an inspiration, to to deliver certain messages and principles and beliefs that I have about what I feel drums should be about, and that I'd like to continue them being about. But I realized that in a lot of the phrases, there were certain little accents. I guess we all do it to a certain degree. Say there's a run of 16th notes. There might be a couple of the sets of 4 on the 4th beat that might be just accented for rhythmic accentuation, rhythmic emphasis. Sure. To go towards delivering a rhythmic idea more groovily, if you like. Absolutely. Yeah. And I've realized that really translated from drums to piano, because and maybe vice versa too. I don't know. Sure. Weird, huh?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I wonder do you think you'll get into, if you're going to do drum lessons, and you may have been teaching your whole life, but do you find that once you have to start analyzing your playing, that you're like, oh, I don't even realize what I do there? Or do you come across that, like, what am I actually doing when I do this do you have to do you normally sit down and break down what you were physically doing, or is that something you have to go back and analyze?
Well, I'm doing it for the first time in my life right now because I have to.
Right.
And for me to be clear about certain independence and coordination issues, which are very important to me from the point of view that it opens your vocabulary, it improves your concentration, these kind of exercises. And so for the first time, I'm kind of like looking to see a little bit more into perhaps what my vocabulary happens to be, if I'm playing along with somebody. I mean, I'm talking about the moments that you go with the flow and you go with the inspiration of playing with somebody, and you're kind of working off each other.
Sure.
In a way. And you really not very conscious about anything else.
Sure.
Like, am I playing 16th notes or quintuplets or...
I would imagine you want to get to that place where, virtuosos like you are probably not normally explicitly aware of exactly what they're doing. I think that's the idea, is to get to your skill set to a point where you can be caught up in the moment and reacting without saying, I am doing 30-second notes, I am doing 30, that's...
Yeah.
You don't want to be caught up in the physical manipulations of it, because then your portion of your brain is taken up with that. You want to be able to just execute.
Yeah. And well, really, it stems from the people I was listening to,
Yeah, now talk about that when you grew up listening to players, and I mentioned Tony Williams, and I don't know if that was your main inspiration, but obviously he was a big person.
Yes.
I want to go into more of that, and of course Tony Williams was a landmark. But do you have a similar? I don't know. Do you have a similar person who was of that caliber in keys? I mean, whether it be contemporary or is it?
Not that I really think of in that way, but I have to say, and I'm going back to Alan again. He had some cassettes of Tony playing piano.
Oh.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And really, it's probably best way to answer a question like that, because I remember him. I was acquainted with one of the, I knew all the records, but one of the records, the Lifetime records that he did, it's called the Old Bums Rush. I don't know if it means anything to you.
I don't know that I know that.
It's a little bit of an obscure one. It's after the famous original Lifetime, kind of between that and the one that Alan Pasqua played in. So it's there was a strange series of albums that they got a little bit obscure, but I loved them.
What's funny is he probably would not approve, because what I've read is that he did not approve of the record in general. The very first album by Alan I bought was Velvet Darkness, which I heard he was not fond of. It was the sort of outtakes, and are you familiar with it?
Yeah. I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too. But apparently, from interviews, he said he wasn't intending it to be released. Apparently, or
yeah. Yeah, you have to understand with Alan, this is not a straightforwardly wired guy.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
I mean, he was. I don't know. I mean, for him to be in a recording studio with a series of guys playing his compositions, and I used to kind of argue this with him a little bit and just say, man, you had Michael Walden in there, and you had Alan Pasqua and Alphonso Johnson, and you were in the, and Creed Taylor was there, or whoever the guy was. I think it was that record label, CTI.
Yeah,
ring a bell.
Yeah.
And I guess they were running some things. They were kind of rehearsing. Some of the time, Alan would say, actually, they recorded rehearsals and they put them out. Well, that's not cool. Yeah,
right.
And I know that feeling too.
Sure.
But because it's happened to me. But actually, these were kind of sort of pieces that they'd go and listen to, and they did a few versions of each.
Right.
And I think it was pretty obvious they were making a record.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I don't think it. I never bought that this was strictly a rehearsal. It sounded like sessions that were, but there were multiple versions of each song. But I do agree that if the artist is saying no, this is not what I want to put out, then it shouldn't be put out. But the
Yeah.
I mean it's
In an ideal world, but probably paperwork had been signed, and
that was not the first record label to put out something without the artist's permission. So.
Oh man, I think history is littered with
Yeah.
The music history of music.
Right.
I had an instructional video, and they really, I mean, it was really not fit to have seen VHS tape or whatever format it was, Betamax or
yeah.
I don't know, years ago in the 90s, but and it simply wasn't good enough, and they kind of reneged on really what I went to them with, which was, to me, hopefully an instructional video, something that could be of some use to somebody, and something, of course, in those days that people were going to buy,
right?
And not just pick up free somewhere.
Right.
And I wanted it to be qualitative, and it just wasn't. And they put it together, and they just said, "Well, no, we figure the music does the best talking," and all my subject matter was left out. I mean, it was just a travesty.
Yeah.
So I do know the feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm jumping subjects, I know, but go back to your influence like Tony Williams. Were you?
Yeah.
Equally inspired by people like Buddy Rich and things like that, or was there a certain school of more of the jazz drummers you were into, or?
I know Tony was. He loved Buddy Rich.
Mm-hmm.
I
did. I mean, I loved him,
me too. Playing with John and playing with Alan, I think he dragged both of them to Buddy Rich gigs.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, he was a big.
Well,
Buddy
if nothing
Rich
else,
man.
it was just impressive to see. He was visually impressive. I mean, he was a non-drummer could enjoy his performance.
Oh yeah, I mean, he had it all, didn't he?
Yeah,
I mean,
you could have no idea what you were talking. You had no idea about music, but you could see that he was,
I think, just to go back to your question, I think I tuned into Buddy Rich for excellence.
Okay.
But there were other things that I was tuning into that turned me on as a musician.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And this was the distinction. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, he was.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love jazz, but I love in limited doses. Like, I was more of a rock guy, but I made a very, very concerted effort in my teens, and this was in the 1980s, to find out who people's influences were. And then I went out and made a point to, okay, I'm going to learn Chick Corea. I'm going to learn Herbie Hancock. I want to know, Stanley Clarke's music, and Mike Stern, and, Miles Davis and Charlie Bird Parker. And I wanted to, Mingus and all those guys, Tony Williams. So I love that music, but it was an acquired taste for me. I didn't naturally love it. I had to get to love music and then educate myself more on jazz. And as a result, I definitely lean more towards jazz fusion than pure jazz.
yeah.
And you will not catch me listening to hours of bebop. I can appreciate it, but it's not what I want to listen to for hours. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's always fascinating to be exposed to excellent musicians. But there's nothing wrong with these are fantastic, and I enjoy having that vocabulary. But on my own time, I may just listen to this song instead.
Sure.
So I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
I feel exactly the same way, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely, and it gives you more just being well rounded. It's the same as being well read or being a liberal education and just everything. It's just one of those things. Now going back to songs like yours, talking about jazz and horns and stuff, and this is a bit of a stretch as far as segues go, but the song "The Defender" from Hot Wired, I think. Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about? That is what I call.
Oh, it was a big hit.
Yeah. But it's got what I love. I call gangster horns.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just my colloquialism for it. But now on something like that, are you writing all the parts? Like, are you writing out the horn parts, or?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you come across things like where you write a part out for horns, and then a horn player says, actually, that's out of the range of a sax or a tenor sax, or this is out of the range of a trumpet, or do you have that problem, or do you know basically the ranges of those instruments?
No, study them.
Okay.
Study them and really analyze the great players and focus in on what kind of registers that the instrument really works in, and
right.
and when they get intense, what kind of, just really to study the essence of saxophone or trumpet without being able to play it.
Sure.
I mean, I did study trumpet once, and it was the worst sound. Oh man! I mean, my trumpet teacher begged me
to switch.
He said, "Give it up, please." Yeah. But I mean, he was right.
Right.
But the thing is, no. That was kind of an experiment to me because, I mean, if anybody's interested in writing, tuning into this, the group that you're referring to was had no harmonic instrument. Mm-hmm. So there was no piano except for bits of piano that I put in.
Right.
But I deliberately left it very empty, in a sense to be a little bit provocative mm-hmm. with the emptiness a little bit.
Makes sense.
And how I was often drawn into writing for two sort of melody instruments, linear instruments, was to write, like a major seventh part and all these kind of things. I got that from Leonard Bernstein.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking about like diverse influences and realms of music.
Sure.
I mean, that's right out of Leonard Bernstein.
But undeniably a master, so yeah.
So, and also, who's the film writer who wrote the music for Psycho? Several film writers, actually.
Wrote the score for Psycho?
That I unashamedly stole techniques from. Yeah, sorry, Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah, okay.
Did he do that?
It's Bernard Herrmann, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just love the impact of that because it establishes something, but it doesn't complete the harmony for you. It's like you've kind of got to make your mind up what it is yourself.
That's on a simple, but a far example, but still in the ambiguous mode, is one of my favorite film scores is Ennio Morricone, who's very much has very bleak and vague landscapes.
Oh yeah, sure. No, there's some marvelous writers I know, and I'm influenced by them all.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they're all in the writing. So, and I think, there's a saying. A lot of musicians say that whatever you go through as a musician, whatever different kinds of music you go through, even through necessity, mm-hmm. Stuff you don't want to play, it may affect you in a certain way and leave something with you.
Right.
When I was 16, I was playing Tommy Dorsey and Harry James music. Mm-hmm. With a big band, that made its mark with me. It not because I loved it, but because it had a certain impact on how the drums had to really center that music mm-hmm. and how they had to speak in a big band. And it's still very much my sound today on the drums.
It's amazing. Like, you can get a big band, you can have just dozens of people, but it's still so mm-hmm. dependent on that one of the drum set. I mean, it absolutely will fall apart without that. So it doesn't matter if it's a 3-piece band or a 23-piece band without the drums. It's funny you mentioned how much you like the empty spaces and things like that, because I'm going off on a tangent, but for the last 3 or 4 days I've been daydreaming during the day that I want to sit down on guitar, and my goal is to try to sit down the next few days and write a short instrumental totally in the Locrian mode. But I know it will sound probably bad because it doesn't resolve. There's no resolution, there's no resolving chord to anchor it or to finish it, so it'll by nature sound sort of like, what are you doing? Where are you going? But it's just something I want to experiment with, and maybe it'll probably be awful. But I just like it. Let me go off on this tangent for a few days and see where it takes me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it's funny you should mention Gangster. What was it?
I just call it Gangster Horns. Yeah.
That's actually John McLaughlin's nickname for me, Gangster Chords.
Is it really? See?
Yeah.
Great minds think, and so does my mind. Being not a great mind, but that's pretty funny.
I missed that.
I was just saying, great minds think alike, and apparently sometimes mine think like theirs too.
Oh yeah.
Well, tell me, it's not the only one I thought of, but yeah, it's sort of a more sinister West Side Story melody kind of thing, but
exactly. Yeah. I stole everything, Peter.
Yeah.
We all do.
Everybody stole everything. There's 12 notes.
I'm a hoax.
Yeah. Now let's go to something more recently. A Meeting of Spirits. Are You the One? Is that mostly freeform? How much of that was composed? Because it seems fairly freeform to me. It seems like basically you had a chord sequence or maybe a key, and then you took it from there. Am I on target or way off?
Well, a little bit, because I think the approach with that record was to highlight these already wonderful, great compositions that were already incredible, and what I wanted to do was kind of make a tribute out of it to a man, a legendary man, of course we all know, and but I didn't want to make a tribute out of simply covering the material.
Right. That makes sense.
No, and being the inventive genius and creator that he is, an innovator, I just naturally assumed that the best way to pay a tribute to somebody like that was to create again.
No, it makes perfect sense.
If it makes sense,
it does.
and as long as I'm not being pretentious.
No, I don't think it's pretentious. I think it that follows in the spirit of the music better, and just sort of taking the vague skeletal outlines and brush in the rest on your own. I think that makes perfect sense to me.
I mean, I wanted to say thank you to him by taking him on a journey through his own music that he didn't know,
Yeah.
And that was a fresh kind of a presentation, totally.
Yeah.
So what actually happens in the piece "Are You the One" on that record is that it starts with the motif from You Know, from the Inner Mountain Flame, and that segues in, just because it made a good intro,
right?
And that segues into the theme of "Are You the One," which was, of course, with Jack Bruce and Tony Williams,
right?
And I've got the mad voices on there, and the whatever. And then that morphs into Miles Beyond, which was a song off Birds of Fire.
Yeah.
For Mahavishnu. So that
was the first album I think it was the first Mahavishnu album I had. That was that was the one with Open Country Joy and.
Yes. Yeah. And that actually gives way to the final piano solo. I mean, there are solos. There's a percussion solo, and there are little bits of piano solo, and then there's a major piano solo a bit later on, which is actually over the movement of Miles Beyond. And then when the melody of "Are You the One" comes in, I'm playing it over Miles Beyond. So it's a really interesting, if I may say so myself. No, that's the way it came out. It's like when you make a cake and you think, well, geez, that didn't taste anything like it did last week, or the time before it was a lot better, but now it's a lot different. It's not how I imagined it at all. So it's music's a little bit of an adventure playground, isn't it?
When you make a cake and go, maybe I didn't use paprika last time.
Well, actually, I would prefer that than, my God, it tastes just like it did before,
Right.
let's invent something else.
Well, talk about McLaughlin. When you're accompanying those guys, or they're playing with you, do you have to? I mean, you've got your style. Do you find you have to find different spaces to fill? Because now, you say you got three virtuoso players: Alan Holdsworth, John McLaughlin, and Gary Moore, but they're all vastly different. At least if you're a musician, you can tell. I mean, Gary Moore was very, very much more into the blues scale.
Yes.
And an absolute monster player, but very much more traditional note choices. So do you have to find? I mean, do you have to make mental adjustments to that, or is it? I mean, I guess you know what I'm saying.
I think the adjustment is in trying to find the best thing to play at the right time, but
Sure.
but not only just superfluously. Maybe I really. I mean, John uses the word provoke quite a lot. And that can mean kind of like an irritant sort of aspect, sometimes. But healthily provoke,
Right.
to kind of like hang back off certain ideas, and then preempt if they might play that again, and you give him a little bit of a different platform to play it again over.
Okay.
And it changes the way he does it. And he'll come back at me with something as a result of that. I guess it all just starts taking place in the interplay, in the interaction.
Sure. I'm sure it has to be a developing relationship, yeah.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing about that band is that I mean, we truly go to the edge and back sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even know if we're going to get out of it.
Yeah, it's but that. Now, do you find when you assemble a new band of your own, like one of your bands, or when you get with a new band that you're part of an ensemble, do all of you necessarily, or by necessity, I should say, lay back a little bit the first couple times and do a few run throughs and like, okay, let's run through the structure of the song and then let's start adding nuances and fills? I mean,
it's difficult to talk about music, isn't it?
It is. And because every situation is different. Okay, let's say this way. Say there's an established band leader. Okay, so you go to a first day of rehearsal of Fourth Dimension. John McLaughlin is leading the band. He's running through a song. So it probably goes without saying, and I'm venturing to guess here, that John is going to play what John's going to play. On that very first run through, are you going to basically play a little more reserve and listen to him as opposed to branching out? Are you going to spend the first few times more reacting than proacting?
I'll tell you, out of all those people that you mentioned, and others that I can think of, I don't remember working in a rehearsal context at any time where they expected us to not be full out.
Okay.
All the rehearsals are always full out.
Okay. Well, that's there's no wrong answer. That's interesting.
But the interesting thing is, with somebody like John, for instance, is that a very interesting character in that he will bring a song to rehearsal. He'll usually send us a MIDI file or something with the form of something, the routine of something, and the information and the melodies and the harmonies, whatever. Beyond that, he wants total expansion on everything from us.
That makes sense, because somebody like that is intentionally hiring people of your caliber for a reason. They obviously want the band to be all of a caliber that can branch out and be equal parts of a circle.
It's as if there's a kind of oneness about it when
Correct.
the band is at its best. It's like a car,
Yeah.
It's just, it's either cruising or it's,
Sputtering.
or it's pelting, or it's hanging back or being careful, and then being really kind of assertive, and it is kind of like a car.
Yeah, yeah.
What have I been drinking tonight?
Yeah.
No, The interesting thing I was going to say about John is that he has been known to come to rehearsal and say, well, look, we're going to do it in this form, and then we'll do this twice, and then we'll play that melody there, and then we'll do the last solo, and then we'll finish. Something like that, something like a structure. And then we'll get on stage, and it's completely different. And everybody's looking at each other going, weren't we supposed to, and that moment's, before you can even complete the question,
right?
That moment's gone.
Right.
And, there's a bass solo or something, John comes over to me, weren't we supposed to have finished on that last melody?
Yeah.
And he said, that was the rehearsal. This is the gig.
Funny, yeah.
Wonderful statement. Wonderful anecdote.
That is perfect. Yeah, this is the gig.
But don't you just love that?
Yeah. Well, that's why
adventure.
You have to have people that can turn on a dime, and that's where you have to have that musical vocabulary to be like, oh, we're not? Oh, okay. And yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And that's part of really the joy of particularly that band, and it really only works with him at the helm, obviously.
Right.
And he really does have this kind of Milesian, if you like, Miles Davis kind of wisdom, This
I think when you were talking jazz and fusion, I don't think you have to qualify Miles with his last name. I think Miles says it.
Miles, yeah.
I think you could just say Miles in music circles, and it says it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Now, do you think mostly jazz and stuff, but you had a classical training to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that influenced? I mean, it must have influenced, but it's led to maybe a different choice of like voicings and chord progressions on your part that are different from other people?
Different from others? I think we're all different.
Yeah.
But again, I think when you analyze what you've been through and what started out, particularly in your formative years, especially coming through classical, it's impactful on musicians. I mean, it's to start with, it's all very, very powerful music. I mean, and highly passionate and highly intense and sometimes romantic. And, when I think back to some of the repertoire that I used to tackle, but I have to say that the real turning point for me, although I didn't realize it initially, was one of the teachers I had introduced me to a series by Bela Bartok called the Microcosmos System. And it was a series, and it went up in different levels. And what this whole series was about predominantly were coordination and independence exercises.
Okay.
So you develop the kind of contrapuntal ability to be able to concentrate down the middle, or whatever this they say it is, when you've got two things going on and you can't concentrate on one. Right. Anyway, so not only was this happening in a really, really interesting way. I mean, these compositions, short form though they were basic and exercises that they actually were introducing me into the world of highly evolved rhythm and independence, but also bitonality.
Okay.
So that I was starting to see really the inroads into what that genius was all about by these exercises. And at first, it went right over my head. I couldn't hear it at all. And I remember I used to ask my piano teacher, is this supposed to be kind of in tune or like a melody, or do you think he meant that? Or
right.
No. But sooner or later, the penny dropped, so to speak.
Sure.
And I could really, really hear this unbelievable world opening up in terms of harmony.
Well, I think we'll put that as the quote for this interview. I'm going to put Gary Husband on Mozart. Do you think he meant that? No. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Hey, I am in Vienna, and
right.
they're gonna drag me out of that window in a minute.
That's right. I don't want you expelled from the country for that. Yeah. Yeah.
But
it's a funny quote out of context. Yes.
Yeah, for sure, it was influential. I mean, heavily influential. If you listen to this record with "Are You the One" on it, there's so much classical on there. I'm not really conscious of how much of that was instilled in me, but it was just, it's like the essence and the influence of it. I mean, it's not like I'm following any kind of grid or any classical criteria, because I'm not. I'm just following my nose.
But it probably instills you a sense of what's a correct point, counterpoint, or what's a correct answer to a call and response. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's subconsciously there.
Yeah, subconscious. Yeah.
You had the solo tour last year where you were doing the piano and the percussion, the drums at the same time. Was that the first time you've ever done something like that, like live and really done it?
It wasn't the first time, but I did actually debut the idea straight after that record came out, so that I could. The idea was really just to integrate the drums somehow with the piano. But the problem was in the fact, and as you say, yeah, thanks for noticing. We went to Japan with it, and we had a few gigs, and people were looking at me like, "What the hell? Why? How?"
It's neat though,
yeah. And I was asking myself the same question, believe me. But I think what I learned from this first attempt at it was that it could really work, because what I'm not using is any playback and any things that trigger loops. Right. So I've got really nothing there but what I'm actually physically executing at that moment.
I was wondering if you could, because so many drummers already incorporate MIDI triggers and things like that, but
I didn't really want to. Yeah. I wanted to try and find a way that and the answer really is sublimely simple, and that's to write specialized music for it.
Yeah.
Not to try to sort of play pieces on piano that I'd like to play with some drums, because there's always one hand missing from either instrument. Sure. So, but you do have your feet.
No, it's a fascinating challenge to present yourself. It really is.
I must have been out of my tiny mind. But
it's a bold move. It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I was nervous. I was nervous to go on stage with that. But some nights were better than others. And actually, when you throw yourself into something like that, it's what's the phrase?
Sink or swim.
Fight or flight.
Yeah, fight or flight, or sink or swim.
Yeah, sink or swim, or and something comes.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of nights like that, and I thought, wow, did anybody record that? No. And always the way.
Yeah.
But so it's a little adventure, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when you play, it seems like when I watch videos of you playing drums, it seems like you play with a matched grip. Do you ever play with the traditional grip, or do you always play matched?
Yeah, I do. I do.
It
kicks for me.
You play traditionally?
Yeah.
Okay. It appears matched to me. I guess it's just video, or what I'm seeing from looking over the drums, not seeing it right. Okay.
I actually put a couple of videos. It's funny you should say that, but I've got an Instagram account, and I put up a couple of videos. The last two I put up, I'm playing traditional grip. Can you believe it? And then you mentioned that. Amazing.
That's funny. Yeah.
But I feel it. Actually, it's really nice if a drummer plays brushes. It's really nice to play traditional grip.
Okay.
Match grip brushes, I do not like. So I always revert to it for that. But for jazz playing and the Hot Wired record that you referred to, that was all traditional grip too.
Okay.
In my art blade mode.
For you, is there a performance threshold? Like, if you're going to play something just all out, like as hard, the most difficult fills you can, or as fast as you can? Is there a threshold where you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to revert to match grip for this? Does that make sense? Are there certain things that you'd only feel comfortable performing in one grip or the other, aside from the aforementioned brushes?
Yeah, no, I know what you. I think some of the more powerful, strenuous playing that I've done and will do, not. I don't really have the accomplished thing with traditional grip, like say Todd Zuckerman or Michael Walden or
Right.
either of these players who are predominantly traditional grip.
Right.
No, I mean these guys are like lions with that grip. It's
Yeah, but that makes sense. I mean, I think if you have one thing that's your strength, at some point, if you get to a challenging enough part, you're going to have to revert to what your more comfortable position is. But,
yeah. Plus, there's the whole open-handed thing too, and that kind of goes out the window once you pretty much resign to traditional grip. It's pretty hard to be doing any open-hand stuff.
Yeah, I got you.
So what it gives you lose other things. Always the same, huh?
Yeah, exactly. That's life in general. Now, when you're out on tour, you're going back out with the Fourth Dimension soon, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you're on tour, are you ever, and this is any tour, are you able to come up with musical ideas on your own, or when you're on a tour, are you basically committed to focusing on that set list that you're going to be performing? Or that set, you know what I'm saying? Or does your mind wander and do you get creative on tour because you're playing so much, or do you have to focus your energies on that music that you're performing?
Do you mean, is anybody thinking about any other music while we're on tour?
Do you come up with a tour and say, okay, I was on tour, we're playing so much, so I came up with these 3 new ideas for something I want to work on? Or are you pretty much focusing solely on your set list when you're on tour?
No, I think everybody's kind of either writing or, I mean, Etienne and Mbappe is usually writing in the back of the bus for his own band.
Okay. Yeah, so you're not
just... We're on the bus.
So you don't have to sort of zone in on one thing.
I think with music, I think it's just left to the stage, Peter.
Okay.
And pretty much we the hard work is. I mean, we all know we've got to really do a serious amount of work before.
Sure. Because
those pieces are not easy to play.
No.
Believe me. So as magnificent as they are not easy. So it requires a lot of practice. And for me, as a keyboardist, I'm actually doubling a lot of melodies on synth and playing chords. And the chords are usually a kind of a rhythm. So there's a lot of coordination and independence. Thank you, Bela Bartok.
Right.
So, but that takes work. Right. It takes serious.
And that's one thing I just was thinking about with the keys and the drums, despite one being melodic and one not. They both require a fierce independence of each hand. So, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And feet. But yeah. Yeah.
But we just thrive on the challenge, and I don't think anybody even warms up before. To be quite honest, I think we just talking about stupid things and making jokes or watching movies and stuff. And then you get there and check in, and then you go sound check, and then have a little bit to eat, and then you play.
Yeah. Now, what can we expect from you next, or is that too far out? Any more solo projects or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have one in mind.
Okay.
And it's a very different kind of drums, guitar, and bass trio.
Okay.
In that some of the things will use some pre-recorded stuff to enhance really the songs for the better, but there'll also be a lot of space.
And it's all in the Locrian mode. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. In that and many others, simultaneously. No, I've got a great guitarist and new friend called Alf Terje Harna.
Okay.
And he's from Norway.
Okay.
Stavanger in Norway, and my old friend Jimmy Haslett for the bass player. So it's a real kind of cross current of, geographically of who and where we are. But I think it's going to be the material that we've got. Alf's written up quite a lot of material, and he's got a really kind of unique voice on guitar, and it's totally unlike Alan and totally unlike John. Cool. Thank God.
Yeah.
Because with all the guitar players there are, I'm finding it so difficult. Well, I have found it so difficult because I just don't want anybody that makes me think of those guys.
I can see that.
And with Alan, I know we spoke at least in interview realm about before, but I just can't go anywhere near what he represented with anybody else.
Right.
I mean, the book closed for me, horrible, but there it is.
No, I totally understand that. I mean, I've spoken to other guitar players who didn't play with him but were vastly inspired by him. I know.
Yeah.
And one gentleman said, I won't mention, but he's an absolute virtuoso and very well known in the world of virtuoso guitar. And I said, have you ever thought about doing maybe a tribute to Alan and do his music and stuff? And this is maybe a year ago. And his response was, how do I expand on that? Like,
it does beg the question.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, well, what can I do that he hasn't already done? So,
I know.
Yeah, so.
I know.
So that's interesting. So the new project, you're thinking of having a lot of original material. Will it have any covers, or you think mostly original?
Yeah, some covers, but some really untypical ones. There's a Beach Boys song.
That's different.
Yes. There's a song by, there's a George Russell tune, the jazz composer. Mm-hmm. There might be a Burt Bacharach tune.
Very prolific songwriter.
Yeah. So it really crosses. Yeah. It's a real work of the imagination.
Well, I'll be looking forward to hearing that.
Thanks, Peter. I'll make sure you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please keep me informed. I'll be definitely wanting to get the word out about that and give it a listen myself. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah. Just to see the surprise on people's faces.
I just want to know what Beach Boys song you'll pick, because I find them fascinating. But
it actually could be one of three at the moment. Okay. Can you believe that?
They've got things that they've got stuff that I dismiss out of hand, and they've got stuff like Pet Sounds, where I love that whole album, like God Only Knows, and things like that I just love. So that's got to be one of the most incredible songs ever written, right? God Only Knows.
And Carol I Know is one of them that we are auditioning.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Well, cool. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And thanks again for joining. I know there's a big time difference here, so I appreciate you joining us.
No, I was looking forward to doing it, so I just sort of grabbed and.
Absolutely. No, it worked out perfect with timing. So, bye-bye.
We'll be in touch. Thanks again very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye.